Hello, and welcome to the Trust the Unknown podcast. I'm your host, Andrea Klinchokova, and joining us today is Tiffany May Yan Chan. She's a spiritual advisor, and she guides leaders to embody higher levels of consciousness. Her mission is to help extraordinary individuals unlock their spiritual potential and live with courage, love, and compassion. As a master Akashic healer, she teaches leaders how to access the quantum field and lead from their higher selves. This is how we actually met, through the Akashic records and the higher selves mastery trainings. Tiffany offers wisdom that is both grounded and accessible. She brings over 20 years of global experience, working closely with CEOs, heads of state, and civil society. And she was recognized as a Global Leadership Fellow at the World Economic Forum. Welcome to the Trust the Unknown, Tiffany.
Thank you for having me. I love the title of your podcast. It's beautiful.
Thank you. I'm really, really excited for this conversation, and also that you could find time, because I know you're super busy. So thank you. And let's start with what brought you here, where you are today. Your title you're using at the moment is spiritual advisor. So is that something what you dreamed about from being a kid? How was it for you?
Yeah, I think like many people who are called to this path as a child really experienced some supernatural experiences that didn't necessarily make sense, but it was fantastical and fun and lovely. And at the same time, I didn't necessarily have the societal encouragement to be able to pursue those experiences. And because there wasn't necessarily like the affirmation externally, I was thinking, okay, well, I'm just going to park those aside and see what else, society is asking, expecting, like encouraging me to do. And for that, that meant, following the conventional pathway. I have a background in political science. I've worked in Washington, D.C. for several years, having worked in policy and international development. My background is also, I have a master's in business administration, MBA. So my interest has always been global, as well as sort of like that management business perspective, and ultimately found myself not only doing work within the United States, but then also abroad, having worked abroad in Geneva for the forum, as you mentioned, but then also living abroad in Beijing and Johannesburg. It wasn't until I actually went to Johannesburg that I was actually in a car accident, and it really shifted my perception of reality. It was one of those sort of like sliding door moments where everything, sort of shifted. It was like as if time and space slowed down. Thankfully, I wasn't physically hurt, but I was really shocked by the trauma of the event and began to like really ask myself those basic but also very important questions that I think every one of us always has in the back of our minds, but doesn't necessarily create time and space for, like, why are we here? Is there a God? What is my purpose here in life? And I didn't necessarily know how I knew, but I knew that there was a correlation between that particular accident and a desire to step forward along this sort of like skinny pathway, this like pathway that had been beckoning me since I was a little child. And so I said to God, Spirit, Source, okay, you got my attention, and I'll give you 3 months. 3 months to get it sorted, my relationship with you, because anything can be project managed within a quarter. And I want to understand figure out the answers to the universe in 3 months. And then from there, I just want my old life back, because my old life was pretty fantastic. And I just wanted to like get to some sort of like, I don't know, like stable place, or just like a inner sort of like knowing just good enough that I could revert back. But as you probably know, anyone who has walked along this path, the more that you step forward, the more that the carpet sort of like unveils and more questions came to the surface. And I began to experience again these pretty phenomenal spiritual experiences, whether that they be visions or feeling global events before they happened. And then my whole world, sort of opened up. And it wasn't until I sort of like hit a wall with like, okay, I'm experiencing these things, but I'm not necessarily finding these particular answers, or no one's necessarily talking about this in conventional religion. Like I don't understand like what is happening, but I need context and I need other people to talk about this with. And I felt like not a lot of people were like, not a lot of communities were talking about this. And so one of my friends said, hey, why don't you check out the Akashic records? There's this woman that's able to access the Akashic records. And I didn't even know I couldn't even pronounce it, right? But it wasn't until that point that I got introduced to my teacher, mentor, friend, Brenda Pell, our fellow teacher,
Yes.
that the Akashic records in that whole world opened up, and went from a client to a student to assisting her in her classes. And now I'm also teaching my own courses now. So it's been a phenomenal journey, a really deep unveiling, and a true act of surrender. But I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah. Wow. I have chills all over as you are talking about this. This is amazing. This is amazing. And actually what you are describing what you are talking about, it is all about trusting the unknown.
Yeah.
Even though at the beginning you put there 3 months deadline, but still it was an act of surrender, as you said, and at the same time the trust that something is going to unveil.
Yeah. And, I don't necessarily think that that's natural for humans. And I just want to be very clear to your listeners, your community, and anyone who might be watching this later. Um, I'm a pretty skeptical person. I like to have like my background. I like to do my research. And, I was borderline cynical about anything that was in the realm of foretelling, foreseeing, prophetic, Akashic records, largely because I didn't want to be taken for a fool. I didn't want to place my trust in something to only have it crumble later on. Yeah. And I wanted to make sure that if I were to trust something, that it was concrete, that I could depend on it, and that I was placing my foot on something that was solid. Little did I know that it's actually in the process of stepping forward that the ground comes up to meet you. It's actually a co-creation with the universe, that spirit is actually beckoning us and saying, hey, you go first, we will meet you, but we're not going to force you into anything. You've actually got to showcase your faith and trust, and we will meet you halfway along the way. And sometimes also carrying you along the way. But what I say to people is that as you're in the beginning of the journey, if you can't trust, if you don't necessarily have that faith, it's okay. And I totally get it. And I get you. I particularly had to borrow on the trust and the faith of others who had walked before me. It was almost as if other people, particularly women, who were saying, listen, this is the way that spirit has shown up. I know it seems scary. I know it seems unknown, but I know this to be true. And it was almost like I had borrowed on their faith, borrowed on their trust. And because I trusted them, I was able to walk forward. And then I started like experimenting, taking tiny little steps, taking that half step forward. And then I found that as I was doing that, that I was building a relationship with spirit. And I was building like a deeper sense of knowing, not only with this unknown, but also that deep sense of trust within myself. And I think that what the takeaway is that this is a function of relationship. Like intimacy is a function of time and relationship. And if you don't trust all the way at first, it's okay.
Mm.
And at the same time, dare to experiment, dare to try, because I bet your bottom dollar, you will be surprised.
Yes, I love this. Okay. Too many questions at the same time going through my mind. When you said you were skeptical and you are still very grounded and practical, what does it even mean, spirituality, for you and when you work with leaders?
Spirituality for me is accessing the truest, deepest part of who we are.
Nice. I love that.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think that it's incongruent with the human form. I feel like it's a both and. And what I really stand for and what I'm beckoning leaders to is actually to lead from an integrated place, meaning that we are mind, body, spirit, and soul. And as we get in touch with the truer, deeper parts of who we are, it's not like we're being someone completely different. We're just being the most pure self of who Source created us to be. We're in alignment with our divine plan. If anything, it feels freer. It feels more me to be my truest self and to like lead from spirituality means to lead from all of who I
Mm.
am, not just my head, not just my body, but like the truest emotionality, all the ways that all of my color, all of my poetry, all of the romance that Spirit
Mm.
has created me to be in conjunction with that of my brain. And I think that that's the leadership that the world is so desiring and hungry for
Yes.
at this time, right?
Yes.
Like
Yes.
people that they can not only be able to trust, but to be able to connect to at a deeper level.
Mm.
And as leaders, are collaborating with each other to develop these solutions to really big challenges in the world, they have to come up with solutions that are holistic, that are not just addressing things on a superficial level, but are actually looking at the deep root cause. And in order to be able to do that, and able to be able to like access systems at their root cause, leaders must be able to like look deeply within themselves so that they can be able to map those to broader systems. And so that's what I'm encouraging leaders to do. And leaders are beginning to step forward. You see things like conscious leadership, you see things like authentic leadership. These are all sort of like similar angles into the same thing. They may not use necessarily spirituality, but they're actually pointing to that truer, deeper sense of who we are and who we were created to be.
Mm. That's nice. And that's also my own experience that people in general, but leaders particularly, are looking exactly for this deeper connection. Maybe they don't even have a name for it themselves at the beginning, but they are just looking for something more, something deeper, different. And I can see how this can work very, very nicely.
Mm.
Okay, so our summit is called Happy and Successful. And the premise is that we look behind the curtains of that traditional definition of what happiness and success mean.
Mm.
So my first question would be, what does happiness and success mean to you?
You know, I've been asking myself this question a lot. And because I can feel the ways in which I'm reverting back to old models of working and being able to like be to like drive because I am an incredibly ambitious person and I do have great vision for the world. And I am not inoculated to like overworking. And I think that there are people, particularly those of us who are called to service and like can make an excuse. Let me just put this in first person. I can make an excuse that overworking is justified because it is in service to the world, right? And openly, you know, I've been playing with like, what does burnout look like, and why am I in this space of wanting to serve, but then also feeling frayed at the edges? And so, one of the questions I've been asking myself is, what does fulfillment look like?
Yes.
And to ensure that I am nourished on all levels. And one of the things that our teacher, Brenda Pell, has constantly shared with us is that these gifts of spirit, this gift of source, is primarily for you first,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And the reminder to fill myself with light, to allow myself to delight in the love, in the nourishment of source, and to allow myself to be deeply fulfilled in all ways so that I may be able to overflow.
Mm.
And for me, that is fulfillment on such a deep level that I can't help but be happy and successful in life.
Mm. Yeah.
Right. And so for the past like week or so, I have been reminding myself that my relationship with source is primarily for me first. And on the surface, that may be selfish, but I also believe that because I am of source, it actually is a reminder of who I am. By allowing myself to be filled up, it's not selfish. It's actually allowing myself to go deeper into the truest part of my being.
Yes. Yes.
Right.
Totally.
And only when I am deeply connected in my core to that primary identity, then I can be of service. And therefore, I can not only naturally overflow in happiness and success. So there's consistency with both my public as well as my personal life.
Yes.
Because there's one thing to be able to talk the talk, but it's a whole other thing to be able to walk the walk.
Yeah.
And part of personal integrity is actually to have the consistency in my life where I am who I am, who I am, who I am, irrespective of whether or not I'm, you know, speaking on a panel, having coffee with a friend, or by myself with spirit, or just by myself, like hanging out in the woods. And so that's the constant practice for me of that primary identity is who I am, and irrespective of what the circumstance is, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And at the same time, I know that specifically for women, this is so difficult to put ourselves at the first place as a priority. And not only for women, because that's true also for global leaders, leaders in general, business owners, whether it's coaches, healers, whoever we talk to. We are here to serve in whatever way. And to put myself on the first place, it's so difficult for so many people.
Yeah. Here's what I'd offer, and here's a recurring pattern that not only do I see with those who identify as healers or those who are in service or even leaders who are drawn towards social impact issues. So, for example, is that we must be first willing to heal our own selves so that we may serve from a healed place. So let me give you an example. I've worked with a woman who led like a women's shelter because she herself has had past history with physical trauma and abuse. And she has done deep work with her relationship with that trauma, with that relationship with that abuse, so that when she serves, she's actually not doing it from a place of retribution. She's actually doing it from a place of love.
Yes.
Right. And there are so many ways where I see this pattern not only show up in my life, but also in global leaders where they want to be able to do things, quote unquote, of service, but really they're serving in reaction to something that happened in their past, in reaction to a particular childhood trauma. And what they unknowingly do is they actually put this unconscious patterning and this energy out into the system.
Yes.
And we wonder why things never get solved, right? It's because the person themselves, the person at the helm, hasn't actually resolved the issues themselves. And they unconsciously perpetuate the patterns out into their organizations, out into the system. And so really it's about first looking at yourself, taking responsibility for your healing, taking responsibility for your part in the relationship to the organization, in part to the relationship of the system. And therefore, when you do so, everything is a clean dynamic. There's clean energy.
Yeah.
Right. And so when we talk about what does it mean to be happy and successful, I really think it's a lot about personal responsibility.
Yes.
Right. I really think it's about like attending to our own patterning, really taking time to like quote unquote do the work so that we can be consistent in all the parts of who we are, because unconsciously we spew out this energy and we're actually inadvertently sort of like creating twists in a system that we're supposedly like wanting to create systems. And we're kind of like fighting against ourselves. So happy and successful actually is not necessarily about the world. It actually starts with us internally first.
Yes, yes, yes. Absolutely. 100% yes. Thank you for this. Yes, that's exactly it. It all starts within. It all starts with us. And until we understand, accept, and start to work with it, on it, and heal this, and again, whatever word we use, whether it's wound, whether it's trauma, whether it's just unconscious programming, whatever label we use for it, that's where we need to start. And it's true for both business and private life. It's true for every area of our life, isn't it?
Yeah, because we're whole people. You can't hide who you are. If anything, COVID essentially mashed things together in such a way that you couldn't separate your work from your personal, because like, lo and behold, we're actually the same person. You can't help but bring, if your kid is sick at home, you can't help but bring that worry to work. If you're receiving, tension and anxiety at work, it does affect the way that you're interacting with your partner. And the more that we realize that we're that it's all like a whole system, and that we need to attend to our whole selves in order to be able to transmute that, that's when, really the dial shift. That's when we're actually invoking change. And my vision and what I would love to see is where workplaces actually embrace themselves as healing institutions. Where we are able to be able to like say, oh, wow, like in what ways can we actually be able to have healthy, clear examples and blueprints of what does it mean to be like whole people? In what ways can we actually be in healthy relationship with one another? Can we actually create space where we're attending to each other in nurturing ways, attending to that root cause, so that perhaps we can bring those healthy examples back into our personal life? And when we're in alignment with our whole selves, that's when things get lighter. That's when things get brighter. And I do see that future for business. I do see that future for the workplace. And that's the direction that I believe that we're going.
Yeah.
And in fact, we're actually seeing that already. A lot of people are doomsdaying, corporate spaces. And I would say, yeah, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. We have a lot of places to go. But look at where we've been 10, 15 years ago when we introduced mindfulness and meditation in the workplace. People thought they were wacko, right? And now it's commonplace. I just spoke to a new partner at a very prestigious accounting firm. Said all of the new partners have that baseline mindfulness and meditation as part of their core practices.
That's
And so it's
beautiful.
already integrated into professional environments. Then I believe the next step of what it means to be happy and successful is actually to understand energetic dynamics within the workplace, be able to actually heal through energy, not only in our personal lives, but then also through the workplace.
Mm.
And that's the future that I envision.
Yes, I can see it everywhere around me as well. And luckily, also for those people who are like us, we like to the research and to know the things. There is so much research and scientific proof coming to this field saying, actually, yes, the energy, all this mindfulness, meditations, all of these kind of things, they actually really work. And here is the proof. So yeah, I can see that that's where we are moving to, all of us, the whole world,
Yeah.
including business world.
Yeah. And I believe that the new generation has already embraced this. I mean, this isn't, I know so many colleagues and peers who have a daily meditation practice. So I believe that social acceptance of quote unquote spirituality, whatever label that you put on it, if you want to call it neuroscience, if you want to
Yes.
call it energy, if you want to call it conscious leadership, I don't really care what label you put on it. To me, it's the same thing. But I do believe that this is the wave, not only of the future, but of like what's happening presently. And it's active and it's alive and it's vibrant. And we're going to see more and more of this, not only in corporate, but then also in government and civil society. And I'm excited.
Mm, that's a lovely vision. Yeah. So you talk a lot about spiritual leadership and leading joyfully. What do you talk about in your programs or when you work with these global leaders and heads of state and civil society? Where do you start? Where do you go? Can you tell us a little bit about it as an invitation also maybe for others to join you and your vision?
Yeah. So, from a brass tacks point of view, how
Yeah.
I work with people is I move them from a do it for you to a do it with you to a do it yourself model.
I see.
Meaning, I serve as a channel for source, being able to channel wisdom, healing energies, be able to attend to the person and what they're needing at that particular moment, where I'm serving as a vessel of light and being able to offer those energies and that wisdom directly to the individual. I love that. It is one of my greatest delights. And what one of my key purposes here on earth is to empower people to do it themselves. So if people are desiring to work with me in longer relationship and deeper relationship, ultimately what they'll find is that I will teach them the skills to be able to do it. So I will sit with them in session. We're both channeling spirit because we're always channeling spirit. And then we'll actually teach these leaders how to be able to recognize the ways that source is working with them, speaking with them, talking with them, because source has a particular language that they are always communicating with us, whether it be through bodily sensations, that deep inner knowing, or just like the ways that we can feel things in our mind's eye. And so, what I do is actually working with leaders to be able to recognize those particular signals,
Mm.
to be able to trust that, and then take action on it. Ultimately, being able through our partnership, having the confidence to do so consistently. So, I give them homework,
Yes.
literal homework, where they're taking action, right? And it goes back to the conversation about how do you actually know how that you are actually deciphering the messages from spirit, quote unquote,
Yeah.
correctly. There's no correct way, but like, how do you actually know that this is what they're actually saying? Well, you got to test it out, right? You're receiving these downloads, you're receiving this information in a particular way. The only way that you know that is by putting it out into the system and then seeing the reaction from the system come back to you. And actually having that feedback loop creates sort of like a positive reinforcement and confidence that you can step out again. So sort of like that's generally the arc of how I'm working with people. Do it for you, do it with you, and then do it yourself, empowering people. And ultimately, I'm sure as you found with your clients, is that life just gets easier,
Yes.
right? Like life is just like much more delightful. We don't need to work nearly as hard simply because the doors just sort of like magically open. It's like when we're in alignment with spirit, when we're in alignment with the flow of energy, when we're not just using our heads, but our entire ways of knowing, life just sort of like unfolds naturally, and you can't help but be joyful of how you interact with the world. And it's just like a magical sort of like dance. It's a whole entire way of being. And for me, like being able to invite people into that, not only conversation, but lifestyle
Yes.
is such a pure joy.
Yeah, I love this. Yes. It's like hiring the whole heavens to work with you and for you and co-create your best life.
There's so much at our disposal, right? There's so much that is possible, and we don't need to do it alone. In fact, we're never alone. And the greatest myth of the human experience is that we're separate and a
Yes.
part of.
Yes.
And when we allow ourselves to lean back into the identity that we are part and of source, and that there's this whole orchestration working in our alignment, like that is a magical breakthrough.
Yeah. So we are inviting everyone to come and join us to maybe experience your own programs, because I know that you are bringing some new stuff now. You are creating some new programs with friends, and you actually have also offer for summit participants. You are inviting them to your membership.
Yeah, there's a couple things. So the first one is if for anyone that might be interested on how to use energetic principles, spiritual principles in the workplace, but don't necessarily know how to access this, how to apply it, how to be able to frame it in a very practical way. Well, we've got an answer for you. My colleague Molly Flanagan and I have developed a course. It's called Energetic Essentials. It's a 6-week course creating like really practical applications of how to bring these subtle energies into the workplace and to find practical results. This is really where the rubber hits the road sort of course, and very excited to encourage anyone to like hop on board. So please do either join the course, energeticessentials.co, or email us at info@energeticessentials.co. The second option is that, you know, as you know, I have a passion for global leaders and being able to serve at the highest levels. And one of the things that I've found is that when global leaders convene at these conferences, it is the most frenetic, stressful, like overtired, exhausting sort of events, particularly for those of us who identify as empaths or sensitives. So one of the things that I'm doing with some colleagues is actually to create safe spaces, resources, experiences where they can be able to sink in, connect with source, and then really be able to connect in with their inner wisdom so that they can be able to make decisions from deeper places of knowing. So not only having the privacy to do so, but then advocating, collaborating with like-minded people who are spiritually aligned so that they can be able to co-create with spirit meaningfully. So I've created an entire resource library. It's called Davos Different, and would invite anyone who's interested in those sort of events to be able to contact me directly. And the best way to contact me is through my website. It's www.tiffanymchan.com. And there's just a 2-question form to be able to connect, and then we'll find time on my calendar to speak. So again, those are the 3 ways: Energetic Essentials, Davos Different, and then also my website. And looking forward to connecting meaningfully with folks.
Thank you. Thank you for this.
Yeah.
All of the information how to connect with you will be both on the website, www.changeility.com, and also in Facebook group for Happy and Successful Summit, and all over the different social media. So it will be easy to find all this information, how to connect with you. And thank you for this conversation. For me, it opened many different topics I would like to talk about with you. So I hope that we will find some time again to talk more and about other topics as well. So thank you,
Wonderful.
thank you for today. And
thank you.
have a good day.
Thank you.